Without further ado, we are live with the guest of the evening, Mr. Jesse Marcel III. How are you doing, sir? Welcome to Skywatchers Radio.
Well, thank you. I'm excited to be on your show.
You have no idea how excited I am to have you on this show, man. Let me tell you something. I'm a big follower of your family, of your father and grandfather, and they meant so much to ufology and to America in general. I mean, these two gentlemen were amazing individuals, and one of the guests that I always wanted to interview was your father, and I never got that chance. So to interview you, it's an amazing pleasure on my end. It's an honor, really, to have you on the show here.
I'm really sorry you didn't get a chance to interview my father.
It would have made a huge difference in my life, definitely. In fact, let me ask you, because I recently saw part of the citizens hearing stuff that took place, and you were there, and I want to just jump right into this because I was kind of taken back that you didn't really touch on what happened at Roswell with your grandfather much. You were really talking about him, the man, and that's really interesting because to me, their stories, apart from the Roswell crash, is so interesting and so epic in its own nature and everything they went through in their lives. Tell us a little bit about them, who they were as individuals before even Roswell, before all that stuff happened.
Well, I can kind of talk to you about my earliest memories with my grandfather, and some really good memories. They're personal, they're not involving Roswell at all. Just kind of what the man was like, and a way to show it is we'd spent our summers down in Roswell, or actually not down in Roswell, but down in Houma, Louisiana, where he resided with his wife, of course. And every morning, about 6:30 or so, he'd come get us up, rouse us up to go out and do some fishing. He had this wonderful little rancher that backed up to a bayou, and even in the mornings down there, it's about 6:30 or 7 in the morning. It was still 80 degrees, 100% humidity. It was an interesting experience. But we'd go out to his garage, and he'd reach up into the rafters, and he had a bunch of bamboo poles up there, and he'd pull them down, and then put a reel on it, open some old rusty tackle boxes, and we'd go ahead and get set up for the day. Usually the night before, he went out and got some worms or whatever we're using that for the next day, and he and I would walk out to the edge of the bayou, and he'd always, wink, and you got to look out, don't step on because there could be water moccasins and that kind of thing. There'd be in the grass, you had to watch out for yourself. But that's kind of how we started our day. Just a very regular grandpa-grandson kind of relationship. This guy, he lived for football, LSU, of course, next door to him, and just like I said, just a decent, regular guy. The example, the house he built, or not the house, but he bought this little rancher house on this bayou, and for his wife Vio, he built this huge indoor greenhouse, matched the size of the house itself. Inside there, full of plants and everything else. But it just, like I said, back to the basics, just a very you're a basic guy, handyman, football, weekend-loving guy, and just an all-around, just a really good, normal person. If Roswell never entered into his life, he like I said, he would have just been somebody I would always, of course, very much respect.
He wasn't one of these gentlemen who would sit around and talk about like the incident. I mean, he probably never brought it up as you were a kid, right?
Oh no, we did. We talked about it.
Okay.
But he wasn't forthcoming. But if I'd asked a couple of questions.
Got a question. Did he have to be poked and prodded to talk about it in the family? Or was he always out and about it?
It always had a time. We talked about a lot of things, and of course Roswell was one of them. And it would typically start off with something like, Grandpa, I was talking to Dad the other night, and, he had mentioned, as a simple example, some of the crash debris, I-beams, hologram-like images, and we go and talk about that. Oh yeah, I remember that, and we, kind of have a conversation and go from there. So we talked a lot about it, actually in quite detail over time.
Oh, really? So he did bring it up. Now, it's weird because he spent a lot of time without even talking about this to nobody, and then one day he just opened up to the media and did that interview where he spoke about it for the first time publicly. How did that come about? I mean, did he get coerced into that? I mean, were they trying to get him to do it for a long time? Did he want to do it at all for a long time, or did he just decide one day, you know what, I want to open up?
Oh, sure. It's a pretty good story behind that. he was one of those guys. He had a ham radio antenna in his backyard, and he lived for talking to anybody. Not so much about Roswell, just anything, just a armchair. Like I said.
Is it like that scene that we always see the guy sitting on the rocking chair, and and it's like, I remember when.
That maybe a mint julep in his hand, and he's on the radio talking to people around the world. He just loved it. Not they'd send their cards around, their ID cards. I can't say exactly what the name of them are, but for their different call letters for the ham systems, and he had friends all over the world. And one of those people had some interest in UFOs, and this was back in the early 70s, and he happened to mention to that person on his ham radio, hey, I know a little bit about this. And so that was actually the first time he mentioned anything about it to anybody after, a good 20 years.
Wow.
And
so that kind of gave him the courage to speak about it publicly then, I'm sure.
Exactly. Like I said, whoever he was talking to, he was just comfortable in conversing about, whatever. They brought it up, and he was at that point in his life, in the 70s, actually he was in the 70s at that time too. And he I think he felt at peace with his life, what he had done. He did. He in no question, he had some fear of the story. He had been told to stay away from it. But I guess at that point he decided that it was okay, and if something was to happen from it, then something was going to happen from it. That was about it. So.
Now, your father, interestingly enough, he seemed like he was always more eager to talk about the story. Was he more into the subject than your grandfather?
I don't know if he was more into it as much as he was just very accessible.
Okay.
He loved the story, no question. Roswell guided his personal life. He, growing up in where I kind of grew up in rural Montana, and he built a big observatory in our backyard. In fact, the biggest in the state. It was a 12-inch reflector telescope, big silver dome, and it was a lot of fun. But he was a doctor, he was a doctor, but his real love was physics and astronomy. And he became a doctor. He was a fantastic doctor, no question about it. But his real heart lied in looking at the stars, and that was all from Roswell. It was all his experiences back when he was 11 years old. That was the whole thing.
Now, how did he end up doing 2 tours of duty in the military? Now, of course, it was a medical duty, but how did he end up doing 2 tours?
Well, his big thing is, in brevity, he went into the Navy in San Diego through the program to become a doctor.
Right.
And he worked in the military for 20 some odd years, then pretty much retired. And then there was, back in Helen, Montana, where we're from, he put together, or was offered to become a helicopter pilot if he wanted to join an attack battalion, a helicopter pilot. He just fell in love with it. It was an adventure, so he went into that. And he did that for the next 15 years, I suppose. And he was 72, and he was looking at his life. He was like, and he and I had sat down and had this conversation a number of times. What is he most proud of in his life? And at the end of the day, it was a service to his country. By and far. That's it. If I want to be remembered, that's where I want to be remembered, is I served my country in the best that I could. And he was on the phone continuously, and he was a colonel at the time, trying to get a tour. And they finally broke free and offered it to him. He jumped all over it. And he was the oldest colonel flight surgeon over in the war at the time.
There's a very cool picture that I saw online when your father passed that I was looking through, just memorial stuff. And it was him in front of a helicopter, and he was already, this is the second time around. And just that image, I was like, that's an American hero to me. That's a real hero.
He gave it us all. That war really, if there's anything, it really hurt him emotionally. And I'm not quite sure if it was. What's that? Yeah, it took a huge toll on him.
Yeah.
It really. What he ended up by. He went through some post-traumatic stress and horrible things. He ended up by getting a neuropathy in his legs. Had to use basically crutches to get around afterwards. And here's a guy that when he went out there, he jogged 6 miles a day, worked on a gym 4 times a week. and was at the height of fitness. And he's in his early 70s, and it really, really got to him. There's like, if anything, there's some pretty horrible things he saw when he was out there.
Yeah.
But
the fact that at that age that he went out there again, it's just amazing to me.
Well, and one little interesting story is when he was out there, he was a little over a year. He was offered a brigadier general position, but he had to go back again, and he just couldn't do it. He said that it had taken enough out of him at that point that he decided to return home. But so that was quite an honor that they were going to do it. The political process of becoming a general there's quite a process to it, and he would have stayed out there a little longer. And at that time, he just wanted to go get back to his family. So
he was burnt out by then.
Yeah, well, burnt out. Like I said, I think he went through active duty through the Korean War. So he had seen a lot. He'd been through a lot. He'd actually been on a carrier deck one time. I remember he was talking about it, where he was standing with two buddies, and they all got shot. He was the only one left. Or they all got knocked to the deck. His friends were killed. He just was lucky enough to have a bullet pass through him. And that's a pretty strong event. But what some of the things he saw in Iraq just really emotionally got to him. And that's just and it was I admire for him that he actually let it get to him. I think it was just he was at an age where he was just felt a little more about what's going on, and that really he thought he did all the good he could do out there, and he thought after that there wasn't really a lot of reason for him to be out there.
I'm sure he had an interesting perspective, from his take from being out there himself at his age and seeing what was going on and everything he's been through in his life. I mean, I'm sure he had a hell of a perspective to look back on it.
Oh, he did. He always, he was, for country 100%, no matter what was going on. He believed in what he was doing.
Yep.
Of course, as being in medicine, it is a little bit different in that he's out there to, in essence, save people.
Right.
He's trying to help people. So it does come from a little bit different, as far as the military perspective goes. But like it was a kind of funny experience with me. I remember, here's my father, and I'm big for my family, and I'm 5'8", and my dad was like 5'6", and it was I'll never forget one time walking on a base with him. Here's my dad never thought about his military career, and walked down the hallway, and all of a sudden, colonel on deck, and boom, everybody hits the walls. It was an interesting experience. I didn't realize that is the level of anyway. It was an interesting experience. And that wasn't that long ago, maybe a decade ago, and where I realized, wow,
here's the question.
Kind of impressive.
Here's the question: with that kind of respect that he did have within his peers in the military, did he ever receive any weirdness or negativity because of the Roswell incident? Did that affect him at all in his personal life or in his career in the Army or in the military?
There was a couple of people, and I think there's been a big change in ufology over the last maybe 10 or 15 years. But 10 or 15 years ago, there were some people that were more hardcore. Let's ignore the facts, let's ignore the story, and try to hurt the person saying it. And they made some stuff up that was completely erroneous. There was no truth to any of it, and that hurt them. Now, putting that aside, people embraced it. It's the same thing with myself and my family and my who my dad was, my grandfather. That was, like I said, was a little bit different story. But honestly, out of 100 people that I might run into that might recognize my name, maybe 1% of them will come across a little bit negatively. But even that negativeness, it's more like, are you sure that couldn't have been something of the Germans, those kind of things. Never a personal attack, at least not to my face.
I think it's because of your father's nature and his personality. I think he had such a passive, nice personality whenever he did interviews that even if you were skeptical of the story, he came across as very fatherly and very just humble and nice. And that comes off.
Well, exactly. I mean, he had earned his position. I mean, a medical doctor, a colonel in the military.
Correct.
He did things right, and it's like he had no reason to somehow exaggerate some story that he heard or was actually part of when he was a kid. There was no basis for that, and it was a very big part of his personal life as far as, like I said, his true loves go. But like I said, I don't personally, especially in a small town in Helena. It was more embraced than anything else.
Now, what are you currently working on that is related to your father? I know you have a couple projects on the table. Do you want to talk about them a little bit and tell the audience what you're working on?
Yeah, I just finished publishing a book. Came out some about midsummer. It's called The Alien Crash at Roswell. You know, kind of an obvious name, but and it more dealt with the kind of the conspiracy side of what happened. I have a good friend back in England who is a PhD and also does research in World War II technology, and she helped me write it. And we just kind of went through the history of UFOs and sightings, that kind of thing, and with Roswell and all those kind of strange things that happened around it. And there's a lot of good and bad things that happened because of it with my grandfather. But that was that book, and I was lucky enough to meet Philip Coppens, who was one of the creators back of Ancient Aliens.
Yes.
And we got together and did a documentary, same name as the book. And it was a lot of fun working with him. And, unfortunately, he passed away a little over a year later, a little less than a year later, excuse me. But a wonderful man, incredibly intelligent. So I was really blessed to have that chance. And I have those are out right now. They're actually, you can go to my website, it's jessemarcel.com. But the project right now that I'm working on is called The Shadow Legacy. And it's another book, and it's more about all those things that surrounded the Roswell story as far as growing up in, as a Marcel. The interesting people we'd meet, the strange things that would happen. I've put, there's a few bizarre things happened. All those real world things, take the story of Roswell out of it, just some really strange things that happened. So I'm doing that right now, and actually have it out as a Kickstarter project. And one of the things where my heart's really close to right now is I'm working with the Brazilian government. We're working on putting together a museum down there, kind of like an international UFO museum, and that's kind of an exciting project.
Wow, that's going to be cool. When is that going to start getting a little bit of buzz out there?
The numbers are really high on it. It'll probably be a good 24 months. They've located a place where they want to put it, that kind of thing. So it's right now it's all in the planning stages, getting art. Part of where my position was the concept of it, and then the second part, of course, is trying to get together different relics and that kind of thing as far as exhibits go.
Well, with your involvement, are you going to be? Question: with your involvement, are you going to be relocating down there, or are you going to be commuting?
No, I'll go back and forth. It's just an outgrowth of some other projects I have going on down there, and I probably will spend more time. But honestly, I've never been to Brazil before. I just happened to, through a chain of events, happen to meet some people that are up here and start putting it together. But it's an exciting project.
Just be careful with the water down there. That's all I'm saying.
Be careful with the water. Well, I'm told a lot of things. I'm saying, the Brazilian people in general seem like they're very friendly. They say, but it's dangerous.
Yeah.
Watch your back, and Rio's not the safest place in the world. But the government's all for this. It sounds like it's something that's going to happen. We're going through. There's a lot of negotiations going on right now. Just a typical thing. But I'm excited about it. It's a lot of fun. And if anybody else wants to come involved, they're sure welcome to contact me about it.
Very cool. How can people get more information on what's going on there?
Really, you can contact me directly. I don't speak Portuguese, but it's interesting enough. One of my partners is a prince, and he actually grew up in Brazil and is now living in the United States, and he is my translator. And we work back and forth together. But, if anybody's interested in it, just drop me an email, and I'll be happy to let them know what's going on.
There you go. Check them out at jessemarcel.com also. Jesse, let me ask you a question. You're dealing with the production here. You did the citizens hearing. You're familiar with Steve Bassett and disclosure movement and all that.
Yes.
Your personal take on ufology or ufology. Do you think that we're getting to that point that we're going to have disclosure pretty soon?
It's a difficult question. With the U.S. government,
probably not. Huh?
I don't really know. It's some of these foreign governments, definitely. A lot of I just was talking about Brazil. They embrace sightings. They put up statues to sightings. they almost believe it's a religious experience when they see something.
That's true.
France is online. China is. Italy, all these countries. So it's really coming around. I think we might be the last one on the block to really go, to go into that prose. But I think it will happen just because I think it's inevitable. Maybe not with this president or the next president, or maybe the president after that. But at some point, we're going to look ignorant for not, embracing this. So in that effect, I think it's going to happen. I think we'll be the last ones too, but I think it will happen. I kind of came away with a different look at ufology than a lot do, and when it comes to this disclosure, and it might be because of where I came from, where living with my grandfather and father and that kind of thing. And that
you might have really a bit of a different perspective there.
Just a tad.
Yeah,
right.
Just a tad.
It's not really that important for me, for my government to say this or that about it. It's like I believe, as a person to my core, I believe in life in the universe beyond Earth. I have no doubt about it. The only question exists, really, when it boils down to, is the technology there to traverse space? That's the only question. It has nothing to do with whether life exists or not. And so all of this hoopla that's been made into, these people that, denigrating us as, ufologists and that kind of thing. I don't really understand it because they're really, actually, we're really cutting hairs at this point. Was that a real UFO? Was that not? And, okay, if you're willing to believe that we live in a universe with planets around stars, around, and there's many galaxies, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera, then, can you honestly not believe there's life on some of those planets? So if there's not life on those planets, can you tell me that they are not at least advanced as we are? Maybe we were capable of sending out a Voyager back in the 70s. I mean, come on. So it's one of those things. This comes down to, it's not my idea, but, ego.
Right.
Do you really believe we're it?
Right.
And if you don't believe we're it, then all of this can fall into place. It depends where do you want to stop believing? Do you believe that we are the most advanced society there is? Or do you believe, and there's enough physics to explain or to prove that there's obviously stars that are much older than ours, planets existing that are much, much older than ours by, thousands, tens of thousands, millions of years. Do you believe that, are we smarter today than we were 100 years ago? Do we have more technology? Of course, the answer is yes. And so, I mean, at what point do you believe that would stop? Would they want to explore? Well, I'd have to think they're like us. Of course we want to explore. We want to find out what's out there. I can't believe they wouldn't also. And so it really boils down. Ufology is like, where do you start and where do you stop believing? It's like, okay, well, I believe UFOs get here, but I don't believe in abductions.
Right.
Okay.
Right.
Well, if we went to another planet, if we get that technological level where we can visit another planet, are we going to investigate the life there? Well, heck yes. Well, I mean, you crazy to think we don't.
Hold on, my real question on that one is are they there to explore or are they there to conquer? That's two totally different topics.
That is. It is. Yeah.
I believe in the realm where, more than likely that if you have the technology or if your race has made it to the planet without destroying itself, to traverse the heavens, to embrace the technology to travel, interstellar space, you're probably past that. Now, given that, what if you are? Well, not necessarily
so. Hold on, I got to object to that because most every single technological advancements that we've made in history has been due to war and being aggressive or defending ourselves. So taking that into play, if there's a civilization or two that's that much more advanced, did they advance because of their search for knowledge and expansion, or because of their search for or need to make war and conquer?
I would have to, and of course, just my opinion only, that it started out probably through warring, through technology, through trying to conquer their world or to become the leaders of it.
Well, if they're anything like us, definitely.
Yeah, and the next step was to use that same technology that started out, with Goddard back in Roswell, building the first rocket, building the original rockets, that kind of thing. So I think it's an evolution of that, but it's also. I'm also not so ignorant to believe, not to believe that there could be things out there that mean us harm. That we are nothing but, unimportant biological
matter.
things. Yeah, exactly.
We're unimportant biological dark matter.
No,
Exactly.
we're a resource to be used. Is what
exactly. Exactly. I mean, so I don't think we cannot completely ignore the idea that there are things that our planet might have that other planets might not, or that their resources have been used up. It's been in all the
my theory on the whole thing has always been that if they meant us harm, they would have blown us out of existence a long time ago.
If they meant us harm, I don't know about that. If there's a difference between meaning, if they meant us harm, and that's why we've been warned not to go that far out into space. Maybe that's why missions have stopped.
Maybe I think the reason we've been told maybe not to go out deeper into space is because look how we handle our own planet here. We can't get along with each other as a human race, let alone travel space and bring our anger and our hatred to other worlds that are probably nothing like us. I think that might be one of the reasons. Go ahead, Jesse.
Around the tables of the citizen hearing, after everything was over with, we had a lot of conversations about this sort of thing, and one that came up is that it almost seems, with what's happened, like in Great Falls, Montana, with what happened in Russia, with us losing control of some of our nuclear devices, that they're almost there protecting us from ourselves, in a way. In that, keeping us from being able to destroy ourselves. If some people believe that if there was in truth a nuclear-powered third world war, that they would actually step in and keep it from happening. That they have the technology to shut us down in an instant if they want to. And so, I mean, that was actually, I'd have to say, overwhelmingly, that was kind of what I took out of it.
That's definitely a possibility. The only thing with that, to me, would be, where were they, during Hitler's time, or when we dropped the bomb, when Pearl Harbor happened? There's been some major events in this world that it's cost so many innocent lives that you always wonder. Well, it's like asking, God will step in if it gets to this point and it gets this bad, but yet he has never stepped in before. It's one of those.
Hang on 1 second. Here's an answer to that one. Where were they around Hitler's time? You got to understand, the first television broadcast that was major, that really went out there, was Hitler himself, and so they didn't even hear about us. We weren't even a blip on their giant radio antennas and dishes out there until we started broadcasting and saying, "Hey, we're here."
Not necessarily. Not necessarily. That's you're thinking linear if that's where they found out about us. But let's say they've been around for the last 2,000, 4,000, 10,000 years, and somehow they back engineered us from ape into Homo erectus, where we are now, or Homo sapien, maybe they created us. You never know. The stories that we've been told over the last 2 decades or 3 decades now, from the Zachariah Sitchins of the world and so on and so forth, they tell quite an interesting story of our origins on this planet. So let's say, for example, let's go with this, like the movie Prometheus. Let's go with it for a second. Let's just say that they did see life on this planet. So they've been around here for forever, before maybe we even were around this planet. That there's that.
You're right.
Well, I agree. It's and maybe that we didn't become interesting until the Second World War to them.
Yeah.
We weren't advanced enough to even take a look at. But maybe, all of a sudden, when bombs started, a nuclear bomb went off. All of a sudden, they reached that level of technology.
Let's go see what's going down there, and then take a couple of ships and snoop around, because now it's getting interesting. You never know. They might have created us, like the story goes, to be slaves and mine for gold or whatever, and they just left once they got their goods. They left us here, and we've created our society as we have, to it is now. And then that bomb happened, and they were like, "Wait a second." Our experiment is going a little nutty down there. Let's take a look at what's going on that planet Earth. And now we get all the sightings. I think that could be a possibility also.
Yeah, but there's descriptions. I'm sorry, go ahead.
Oh, no, please go ahead.
Yeah, but I was going to say but there are descriptions even in prehistory with some of the original, old texts from India and other parts of the world of, describing nuclear bombs and things like that. So if we had it back then, maybe 10,000 years ago, so they've been visiting us even that far back. How do you explain that only now is when we're really, seeing that much of a visitation, I guess is the best way to put it.
Well, let me answer that real quick before we let Jesse talk here about the point he wanted to make. I can answer that real simple. Why now? Actually, why now the last 100 years? Because UFO sightings has been going around maybe for even longer than 100 years in this country. Right now, we are at a technological advancement with the computers and cell phones and everything. It's becoming easier to share this information with the rest of the world. But don't be fooled. People have been seeing stuff in the sky since the 20s and 30s, probably even before that.
Way before that.
So, I mean, the UFO sightings are nothing new. In fact, my theory has always been that most, if not all, of the mythology that we've had on this planet, like demons, leprechauns, ghosts, all that stuff, or saints, and all, anything that people have seen, angels, a lot of that might have been maybe misidentified aliens. And maybe somebody had an encounter with an alien. They didn't know how to explain it back then, and they said it was a demon that attacked me in the middle of the night. When in reality, they were just getting abducted to be probed somewhere. That could be a possibility. I mean, that has been my theory all along. Now, Jesse, is that a theory that has any water with you at all?
I would say so. I mean, I would, just from doing research, if you look at some of the religious experts a couple thousand years ago, things in the sky were considered more demonic.
Right,
something
exactly.
To be scared of, something to fear, something to stay away from. Don't talk about it.
Right.
Because you're basically talking about the devil. And actually, going back that far anyway, that really could have been why a lot of things weren't. Of course, things weren't people communicate the way they, of course.
Mm-hmm.
But the religious, the religious implications of studying these things were, there's dire consequences for it back then. And I really think that they did a lot to squash. If you saw something in the sky, you look away from it. That is something evil. You don't. Who knows what the stories could have been. But and today I think we're obviously advanced enough to look at. Well, that's kind of interesting. It's also. I mean, people are more receptive. What's interesting about the way ufology is going right now, and that. So I talk to a lot of people, and with a lot of people, there's. People are wondering, well, people aren't as interested as they used to be, and I get that pulled out a lot. And I think you're wrong. It's not that they're not interested anymore; it's they believe in it. Mm-hmm. It's that when you get to the point where you're not trying to convince them that there are UFOs out there. Once they say, yeah, they are out there, they kind of move on. And I think that's what's going on right now. Is that humanity is embracing the idea we're not alone. We are being visited, and that it's not such a hot topic or a controversial topic as it used to be. It's not like, and it could be the new generations of, people growing up. My kids, for instance, there isn't a cartoon that doesn't have some kind of alien life in it somewhere, some UFO somewhere.
Yeah.
It's become part of society. So not that it's not interesting. It's just like, well, yeah, actually, you don't have to prove anything to me anymore. I believe it. Yeah, there's things out there. I've seen things, or I haven't seen things, but I know people have seen things. And I believe that they are out there, and even maybe with us. So I think that is the big change, that paradigm change that's taking place in the last decade, in that people believe.
Now, how much do you think that happened because of Hollywood and movies and TV shows that dealt with the subject and kind of put it out there, and you saw both spectrums, the good aliens, the bad aliens, E.T., for example, it was a nice little creature from another planet. How much do you think that influenced society into accepting the whole phenomenon a little bit more?
Definitely, definitely had an impact on it, without question. Back in, from when I was a kid, when Star Wars came out to today, although it seems like the younger generation, me anyway, people in their 20s and 30s and even younger than that are not so quick to be skeptical. If anything, that old X-File I want to believe idea, there's a lot more positive. There's a lot fewer people that want to spend all their energies trying to disprove something. They're more comfortable, accepting that, it kind of makes sense. Mm-hmm. I'm not going to go forward blindly like maybe the previous generations did. That no, that's I was told, I read in the paper this is fake, so it's fake. That's it. The newer generations, they're like I said, embracing of it. They believe that yes, we are being visited. Yes, there's things flying around in our skies, and everybody that talks about it talks with excitement. The people I'm around. But even a quick story back in she would have been maybe 7 years ago. I used to be a banker. Kind of a bad word. Anyway, we had this big meeting with a big title company. I mean, huge. All it was big executives and all the BS. Everybody was there. It was a huge meeting. Somebody during this big, it was a meeting for a title insurance company to sell the bank on using their title for insurance. Anyway, somebody said, Jesse Marcel, what? Where
do I know that name from?
Exactly. And literally, our 2-hour meeting started with that conversation, and not one bit of business was talked about after that. Everybody was like, "Did your grandpa really? Did he? Was it true?" I said, "Yeah." I mean, he believed everything he said, and literally, that was it. No business took place that day. We had lunch. Everybody had a lot of fun, and it's all we talked about. And half the people, I saw something, or the other half was like, my sister or my cousin, and that's the way everybody.
Yeah,
and it was just, and that's just kind of how I felt a lot about the story, at least at this point, and that it was never skeptical. It was all this, and then hey, I saw something. What do you think? Could that have been something? I said, of course it could have been.
Scary enough that's happened to me at a job before. In fact, recently that happened to me. I was at a job and I just met one of the owners for the first time. I had never met this guy, and he walks in and he starts talking to me and the manager at the store knows about the radio shows that I do and stuff, and he told him, "Oh, he does radio. You should definitely talk to him about doing something on the radio with him, and maybe do a commercial or something." And he's like, "Really, you do radio? Can I see your radio podcast, or do you have a podcast?" And I'm like, "Oh boy, this is going to be awkward." So.
Sure.
I show him my website, PSN Radio, and I go, "Look, this is my show here," and I go to my show page, and he sees a little UFO on there, and he's like, "Oh, so you're into UFOs?" And I'm like, that's the awkward part. Okay, I'm going to have to explain now, my show to him. And he starts asking me, and he just busted out. He's like, I had a sighting when I was a kid. My mother and I were walking, and it was in South America, and they were walking down the street, and this ship just glowed in the sky. And he starts going through the whole story for like 20 minutes. He's going on and on about the story to the point that he started getting chills. And at one point, he started getting teary-eyed because he's thinking about his mom and what happened, and the fact that he had that sighting with his mother. And I'm like, this is amazing. Like, I could do a whole series just on his experience. And this is somebody who I didn't know. He had no idea what I did on radio, didn't know that I spoke about UFOs or anything. And then he tells me I haven't really spoken to many people about that story because it's so personal, but I can't believe that you do a radio show. This is so cool. And he calls me every once in a while. I don't work there anymore, which is funny, but he calls me every once in a while, and we talk about the show, and he asks me, who I'm interviewing. He's really into the subject. It does seem like more and more people are just, they're believers. And I think it has to do a lot with not only Hollywood, but more people having the experiences themselves. Like, my life was changed when I had my sightings. That's when I became a fan of it.
If you think about it, if you really talk to everybody, everybody knows somebody that believes they had an experience.
Correct.
It's not like 6 degrees of separation. We're talking like 1, 2 degrees of separation.
Yeah. In fact, it's funny. I saw something in the sky tonight on my way home with my mother that I couldn't really quite explain. When we were driving real fast, so it might have been just something that could be explained. But even she saw it, and she was like, "What's that?" And I was like, "I have no idea, but I'm driving, and it's the highway, and it's really packed. I don't want to crash, so let's not look at the sky anymore." But it was really a weird object that we saw there. But there seems to be the veil dropping, where more and more people are witnessing these things, which is, again, this is why I'm led to believe that we're going to have some kind of encounter, some kind of first contact or some kind of disclosure pretty soon. And I really hope it's in our lifetime. Like, I know your father is not around to see it, your grandfather's not around to see it. I hope in our lifetime that we are around to see it, and we could finally have that answer. So, we could say, you see, Jesse Marcel Sr. and Jesse Marcel Jr. were on the money. They were telling the truth the whole time, and hopefully by then, Roswell will come out, and the truth will finally be revealed at what happened at Roswell, which I still believe that's a true event. I honestly do believe that really happened, the way Jesse Marcel Sr. said it happened. Honestly,
being as close to it as I have been, and of course for my father, absolutely. And people can say, but this record showed up here or there that might have said this. Like, if you look at the premise from the government in the story, it's like, you think that finding or a new release from a government official is going to really, make everything go away? It's so obvious. There was so much work on the part of the government to try to make it look like something it wasn't. A picture of my grandfather holding debris of a top secret project that we have. How often have you seen a top secret project on the front page of a newspaper? It doesn't happen. It's ridiculous
Right.
to even think. Why was that photo ever taken? It would have never been taken. It's ridiculous to even think that was, it's like, why would, the government was our top secret mogul balloon. It's like, you're going to show a picture to the world about it then? I mean, come on. It's just, at least when you get to that end of it, it's like, it's laughable. But
I mean, your grandfather must have been insulted, though, to really insult his intelligence and take a picture of him saying, well, this is what you recovered. It was a weather balloon, and you just mistook it for an alien spacecraft from another world.
Right.
I mean, that's insulting to a man who's been in his position and would know the difference between a weather balloon and a spacecraft from another planet. I mean, he would know. I would assume.
He has a certificate, actually, a certificate showing he graduated from radar training school. You know what they talked about in that radar training school? Mogul balloon and the Mogul project were part of it. It's just like, how could you possibly? I mean, the whole thing is, it's like, when you get some aluminum sticks or some sticks of titanium, 6 balls, would throw them out in the desert, and have 20 kids that are 5 years old go and look at them. Is this metal or is this a piece of wood? It's like it gets to the point of just insanity.
It's laughable. It really is.
And I do respect those people that look at it and really challenge it and question it. And well, this looks like this, looks like that. Maybe Jesse Marcel. Obviously I know him different. As my father knew him. So, it's easy for me to look at it and look how laughable it is. If I'm on the outside of the story and I want to, either I'd rather challenge it. Like maybe I want to believe it, but I really want to challenge it to make sure that it was real. And I respect that. They can go through everything. They can try to, but if you try to break it down to some document that might have meant this or could have meant that, or 20 years later, 30 years later, a new study comes out, they say, well, nobody has the right memory because it never happened, and it's it just you believe what you want, but it's just because of where I've been. It's like there was no reason for me to believe that my grandfather would have told me some kind of big outrageous crazy lies. No reason for my father to live a life based on the same crazy lies. He was part of it. It affected to the point of that was his love. I mean, his dying wish was basically to have the government say yes, something happened, and not that he hadn't met with officials within the government that admitted that it was really Roswell, but he wanted something irrefutable, a big release of information, and unfortunately, that never happened. Not yet, anyway. So,
Jesse, let me ask you, because there's actually something that came out a while back. They sort of decoded General Remy's memo. I don't know if you saw this. Where you could actually read along, and remember the memo it's at a bad angle. You can't really read it well in the picture that it came out in. But when they decoded it, they do mention the bodies, the crash of the ship, or the disc that crashed at Roswell. I mean, all that is decoded into that memo. What were your thoughts when you saw that, and your father's thoughts when you saw that? And did it completely ring true to them, as this is exactly what happened?
I'll tell you this: it put a big smile on my father.
It was like a validation,
exactly
right?
Yeah, exactly. It put a big smile on his face, and it was basically so to him, whether it was absolutely a true message or not, or part of it, or they're looking too much into it, while maybe they weren't at all. He absolutely said, yeah, this is true. But like I said, it just put a big smile on his face. I remember when that first came out. That blew my mind. Talked about it every so often.
That blew my mind when I saw it. I was like, see, there you go. One step closer to getting the truth about what happened in Roswell.
Well, if you boil it down, it's like I got those same photos, the kind of the famous ones, and had them colorized, used the latest technology and that kind of thing. And I was my sister Denise, who's really deep into ufology herself. We had a chance to talk a little about it. She brought this point and said, "Where is Grandpa looking? He's holding this piece of debris, and he's not looking at the camera. He's looking off in the distance." It's like, what kind of picture is that? It's almost one of those things that she picked up on. It's like, yeah, well, he's being told what to look or what to do when he's sitting there, and that was obvious. That's what happened. He basically didn't realize what he was walking into at that point, and only once he was holding it, and he knew it was going to happen. He knew of an impending cover up, but when he walked in there, it's like he was still in the back of his mind. I think he was hoping that they are really going to let people know what happened, that this is something amazing. And he was just like, he walks in there and goes, "Oh, no, that's not what's going to happen." So, hold this, pose nicely. Like I said, it's interesting because he's looking off in the distance, not in the camera, in any of it. Like, so
yeah, that picture always seemed really funny to me because you could tell he's like looking at somebody like saying, "This is not what was out there." Like that.
Look at his.
His facial expression is like, dude, this is not what I saw out there. Like, that's the picture that I get in my head of him saying. That's the dialogue I hear as he's taking that picture, because that's the expression he looks like he's having.
Well, if you look at it, it's just funny. There's even some photographs in that same series where they have a package for a weather balloon in the picture. It's like, how many weather balloons they sent up with the packaging? It just gets to the point of being insane, but that's just the, this is part of it. But like I honestly haven't run into anybody that believes in the weather balloon story or the mogul balloon.
Well, the government doesn't believe it. They've changed it so many times. They don't believe the story themselves.
No, well, even more at the end. Charles Moore. Even at the end, he met with my father one time, and my father, his biggest thing was, if you get another, you can see the material, and the material that my grandfather and father saw, the foil itself had no paper backing, but at the time of the mogul project, the foil had paper backing, and all I could tell him was that, well, I don't know what you saw. But that later on they released it. My dad said, oh yes, it was a mogul balloon, which is all fictitious, of course. But later on, Moore kind of alluded, and I hope not to read too much into this, and I don't want to put anyone on the spot, but almost like, everything might not have been as it was said to be back then. So.
It's fascinating. Jesse, we're all out of time. Thank you so much for being with us. We want to definitely have you back on pretty soon. As soon as you want to come back, we'd love to have you back on. We could do another hour easy talking to you. It's been just a blast. Give everybody the website address again, jessemarcel.com, right? And anything else that they can find you on?
Yeah, jessemarcel.com if they want to go there. And like I said, you put a nice banner on your site for me. That's wonderful. But jessemarcel.com has it all.
Thank you so much again for being here tonight.
Thank you. It's been a pleasure.